So, let me do a wrap-up. This is not a review of There Are Doors by Gene Wolfe, a 1988 fantasy novel. I guess it's fantasy novel. It's alternate world, but there's a goddess, or there's some being that calls herself a goddess who is immortal. There is a kind of a living articulate doll that has been made, but I mean, just saying something is made, it's like it seems to all intents purposes be a little person that has been created. Homunculus, something like that, which is a little echo, a little miniature infantilized version of the goddess being Laura or Lara, the various iterations of the goddess. The main character is, as described apparently by the author, is a mediocre man. It's A.C. Pine he goes by, or more usually as we go on in the book as Mr. Green, and he has having this kind of brief love affair with this woman named Laura. But Laura leaves him, saying, "Oh, there are doors," and apparently that there are doors isn't there are doors to different worlds. But the trick is, if you go through one of these doors, if you accidentally go through one of these doors, she warns him, don't look back. Just back your way up, and you'll go back to your regular world, which is probably what you want to do. And it's actually striking. This very opening scene really kind of gets, because that's the thing. It's like once I finished this novel, I was like, okay. I think actually for a Gene Wolfe novel, it's actually fairly clear. No hand holding. We get to experience all the confusion of this guy as he goes into these various worlds. There is that Gene Wolfe layer of seems to be a fellow who has had multiple mental breakdowns. I think he's been in the hospital like 8 times, though apparently it's listed as alcoholism on his chart in his latest time, but it could easily be, it's like it's a mental hospital, and he could be somebody who's just not particularly there in reality, which would very much track with Gene Wolfe of Unreliable Narrators. But yeah, let me just read this opener. "Do you believe in love?" he asked her. "Yes," Laura replied, "and I hate it." He did not know what to say. It all stuck in his throat, and everything he had planned that afternoon, walking home from the store. So I guess he was planning on maybe proposing. "We use it, you see," she told him. "My women and I, we must." He nodded. "Women do use love, of course, but so do men, and men usually use it worse. Don't you think that that only proves it's real? If it wasn't, nobody could use it." The brandy had gone to his head. By the time he had finished speaking, he was no longer quite sure what they had been talking about. "It's real, all right," Laura told him, "but I am not a woman." "A girl?" He was groping. So was she, a hand in his pajamas. "A lady." His glass was at his lips. He took it from her hand and drank. And then the men die, always. She holds his sperm, saves it, and bears his children, one after another, for the rest of her life. Perhaps 3 children, perhaps 3 dozen. "I love you," he said thickly. "I'd die for you, Laura. But this is better. Your way is so much better. Now I'll go back. Listen, there are doors." She did not go back at once. They embraced again on the floor in front of the gas log. For the second time that evening he poured himself into her. And afterwards he held her to him, tightly, oh so tightly, feeling as though the two of them were in a boat upon the sea, a little boat that rocked and spun with every billow, and that only his body against hers, her body against his, could save them both from freezing in the freezing spoon. "You must be careful," she said when he was almost asleep, "because we've been so close." And indeed, when he wakes up, she is gone, but he thinks she's just gone out to look for a job or get some clothes or maybe even lunch. But she's left him a note in her angular writing. "Darling, I tried to say goodbye last night, but you wouldn't listen. I'm not a coward. Really, I'm not. If it weren't for the doors, I wouldn't tell you a thing. That would be the best way. You may see one, perhaps more than one, at least for a little while. It will be closed all around. They must be closed on all sides. It may be a real door, or just something like a guy wire supporting a phone pole, or an arch in a garden. Whatever it is, it will look significant. Please read carefully. Please remember everything I'm saying. You must not go through. If you go through before you realize it, don't turn around. If you do, it will be gone. Walk backwards at once. Laura. P.S. You always put these on, don't you, at the end? At the end. I loved you. I really did. Do. So yeah, that is the opening of There Are Doors, which that's where you get the hint that Laura isn't a woman. She is something other than a woman. At least that's how she's putting it. She says, and her woman, and she talks about her women, like she is the goddess of, yes, it's my women and I, the possessive, my women. There's sort of a thing of she is the goddess of women. There's also this thing about, she has this very strange thing of like, you know, and she, you know, so she was handed his pajamas, so they're in a very intimate thing, and then the men die always. She holds his sperm, saves it, and bears his children, which is because in this alternate world, this there, the men die naturally of natural causes after having sex with women, which I guess makes it seems to make it much more of a matriarchal society, maybe a matriarch, maybe a world that is ruled or seen over by this goddess, and women can take the sperm and then hold it and have multiple children afterwards from this sperm, which is just some of the weird kind of sexual relationships that are going on in this book. He ends up in a curio shop run by a Chinese man, and he is given a doll, which seems to be a little iteration of her, and it's not only is it small, it's perfectly shaped little woman, like anatomically, so it's not like a child that way, but it acts like a child. It's very much childlike, and it's the kind of that idea of shrinking down women, infantilizing them for man's kind of power pleasures. And it seems sort of this is me wrapping up the book, so it seems sort of interesting at the end that Laura the goddess is out of the picture at the end, seems to be out of the picture at the end, and he is going off to have sort of a fresh new start in this new world, in this alternate world with this little doll woman. So you know, he is a mediocre small man who in the end ends up with an infantilized small woman as his companion. There is political plots in here. Kind of, there's the paranoia. You get kind of the Philip K. Dick thing of, you know, there's conspiracies. There's a guy named North, which definitely makes you think of like Oliver North or Gordon G. Libby, which apparently is where it was based off of, who is just gigantically he's from our world and is very much an acolyte of Nixon. And there's sort of all these kind of almost kind of like fascistic things here of secret police watching people, of trying to stop conspiracies. I mean, North seems like an incredibly violent and dangerous man. Green, or AC Pine, gets electroshock therapy. His memory is sort of wiped at a certain point, and he forgets all about Laura, and he sort of has his own life. There's time seems to operate differently in the two worlds. There's a strange overlapping of, there's a restaurant which seems to be a bit of a nexus, a Italian restaurant, where if you pay attention, you'll notice that while you're having lunch, other patrons seem to be having dinner, and the restaurant can take both currencies. Whereas in our world, the currency has men on the face of it, on on the currency. In the other world, it's women, which would make sense if men, basically once they become of, are able to reproduce, they have sex and then they die. It's like, well, you're not going to advance in a career up the ladder to be a head of a political thing, I guess, unless you're seriously abstinent. Um, it's a book that you can't settle down with. It's funny, just reading that opening thing, I can see that reading it a second time will definitely yield more to it, and I can see my appreciation for the book growing over time. I think at the beginning I really struggled, and as I went along, I got a little bit more into the kind of the rhythm of things. There are disquieting things of, like, of this little doll. There's an early scene where in the curio shop, he's talking to this Chinese man, and he's referred to as the Chinese, and speaks in broken English, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is sort of kind of horrible, kind of 80s Asian racism. But the character himself, Green, or Pine at that point, actually does make the point of saying, oh, he spent all his life where there's, there'd been that he'd known plenty of Asian American people who none of them had spoken this way except out of, kind of out of a cheesy movie and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, there's some awareness of what we're kind of playing here, of stereotypes. And there's a boxer, which seems like very much kind of a genre, kind of like a boxer thing. There's some ways that the alternate world, you could make the case that this is all of Green or AC Pine projecting kind of pulp stories in his imagination and creating a whole world, that this is all in his head. Um, Up to having a goddess on one side, having this little infantile doll on the other. There's another woman named Fanny who is maybe a secret agent, maybe a prostitute. There's some kind of implications there. I didn't probably pay enough attention. So it's very much kind of a male thing. And it's interesting at the beginning of that. The book starts off with, like, do you believe in love? And, Laura saying that she hates it. And it's because women use it. And he says, well, men use it as well. So, if it wasn't, and, doesn't you, don't you think that only proves it's real? Because if it wasn't, nobody could use it. So, and it's interesting. He has that little thing at the beginning of, like, the brandy's gone to his head, and he wasn't quite sure what they were talking about. We're already setting up that he's our point of view character, but he doesn't know quite what we're talking about. And indeed, when she goes, Mama Capini. That's their dinner stuff. So, yeah. I think I might flip back through it a little bit and just sort of read little sections to myself before I do a full review, because it's an interesting book. And yeah, a Gene Wolfe reading experience isn't your usual genre read. It isn't even your usual literary read, in that it's definitely toying with you in a variety of ways, and I enjoy that. I do enjoy that, even though it is challenging. All right, I'm going to stop there before I get a call and this video gets interrupted. More videos later. I've been Jay.